please. One, two, three.
All throughout my history, your faithfulness has walked beside me. The winter storms made way for spring. In every season, from where I'm standing, I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises and fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Help me remember when I'm weak, the fear may come, fear will leave, as you lead my heart to victory. You are my strength.
And it's Friday.
All right.
What's up, Brian?
Yeah, not much. We just so everybody knows, if you are catching us, we're not on our regular YouTube channel. We were bumped off for a violation that they said that they caught probably 6 or 8 months ago, something about a medical misinformation thing. So we must have said something about something. We must have made a comment about pills or gummy bears or something, maybe gummy worms.
Gummy pill worms?
Yeah, something like that. So we made some kind of a comment. So they're taking us
Yeah,
down
don't make
for-
a comment now because you'll get us kicked off the other
Right,
one.
I know. So we're off for 2 weeks on that main channel. But we are live, although I can't find us live.
On Rumble?
On Rumble. It doesn't say that we're live. I looked.
It says that we're streaming.
Okay.
Um,
I'm not sure how to find us then. But if you are...
Do you want me to send you a link real quick?
What's that?
You want me to send you a link real quick?
Oh, yeah,
if
that'd
I
be
can
cool.
Do something.
Yeah, if you can send me a link. And then we'll try to get everybody updated to our new information for Rumble and for the other uneducated channel. All right. So yeah, it is Friday. We have Pastor Stephen Manley with us. We've had him with us before. So Pastor Manley, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
You are from the great state of Tennessee.
Woo!
Yeah. Lebanon, right?
Yes,
Now, did they pronounce it Lebanon or Lebanon?
Lebanon.
Okay, all right. I've heard it both ways, but we'll take it that way. We'll do that.
Lebanon's Middle East.
Reverend Manley, just so people know a little bit about you, you were evangelist for about 40 years, maybe a little longer than that, in the Church of the Nazarene. You have since then, in the past, I don't know, what has it been now? 10 or 12 years since you started this ministry?
Yes.
Okay.
And during that time, I also was holding revival, so I stayed really in evangelism and planted this church. And it's ended up being a compassionate ministry church, which is we have a 1-year recovery program for guys coming out of jail and trying to get out of addiction and trying to get back on their feet.
Okay, great. And it sounds like you're pursuing maybe even expanding that with some property. Is that something I can mention or no? That's too late.
Yes. Of course, we furnish housing. A 1-year program. They come in, we house them, we help them get jobs, we help them get their ID. See, they come out of jail. They don't have a driver's license. They don't have a car. They've lost their car. Most of them, so they don't have a chance. If they could get a job, they couldn't get there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a full-time driver. We do everything to get them back into a functioning world.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, right in the middle of that, planning Jesus, we have classes every night, and plug them into the church, and Sunday morning and Thursday night service, and besides the classes, and we just keep at them about Jesus for a year.
Now, do they need to? So let me ask you just a couple questions about the ministry. Do they need to accept Jesus? Do they need to be willing to go through all this stuff in order to get these services? What do you require for them?
Oh yeah, yeah. If they don't want to be a part of the program, then they need to go someplace else.
Okay.
In other words, they can't. We drug test. We do all those sorts of things because you can't. Hey, if you're not going to go after Jesus, you don't want to be a part of our program.
Okay. All right.
Because he is ultimately you just substitute one addiction for another. And what have you gained?
Right.
Well, yeah, you may be a decent person in society, but you've gone after materialism instead of after Jesus, so you're still addicted.
Right.
So what have you done?
Yeah. So say someone comes through your program, though, you're not. Even if they're willing to go through all of it, jump through all your hoops, do everything you say, but they're like, I'm not really sure about Jesus. I'm still trying to figure this whole thing out. You guys are still good with that because you know that they're getting the information.
Yeah, we work with them.
Okay.
And just keep saturating. The key to the whole thing is that we've got about 30 guys who are core group who are really after a spiritual change in their lives and are really seeking Jesus. And that group brings the new guy in, surrounds him, and begins to infiltrate. And they begin to see guys consistently say, I've never had family.
As a church, even as a men's group, which our men's group's not huge, I am trying to build up some momentum and see if we can't get down there on a short-term missions trip or just to come down and evaluate and just spend time with you and those kind of things. So if that's a possibility, I'd like to pursue that more here in the future.
That'd be great. We as a 10% special mission program in the Church of the Nazarene, we're open. We're approved for mission programs, for work and witness, for the 10% special, whatever has to do with the mission. We're approved for that by the church.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't even know I see it all the time when I go to district.
We're approved for that by the church.
Okay. I see that all the time when I go to, but I've never investigated it. So to be quite honest, I don't know how many times we've done 10% specials, and to us, I don't even worry about it. I don't shake, so I don't know what it is. If we come down, we'll just come down, and it is what it is. But we'll do whatever we can to help.
That would be great. But 10% giving helps you with your budgets.
Oh,
it
okay.
lowers your budgets.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I should have looked into that then.
You should have.
maybe that's why our budgets are so high.
I'm missing everything because
You're working.
I'm producing.
Right. Well, he's just told us about his the ministry that God's doing there.
I
through
captured
Tennessee.
that. What did you do wrong with the budget?
I don't bother to take advantage of the specials that the Nazarene Church runs, like the discounts and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of.
You're not bringing the money back from Washington.
No.
I see.
But it's okay. You know what? You're not supposed to let your left hand know what your right hand's doing, or vice versa. So we're good with that. It's fine. It's all
Which
good.
has nothing to do with budgets, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just wondering when we start chopping them off.
All right. Well, Reverend Manley, so I'd like to get your view on this, and so we'll just start off with a bang. We'll throw this out there. Women and their roles. So we've just gone through a time in our culture's history where we've kind of revisited the whole racial issue and the whole Black Lives Matter and the systemic racism problem, and that's kind of it's not gone away, but it's in the background. And now we're having equality for the transgender movements and that. And now we're seeing a real surge in feminism again, but not feminism in a mean way, like burning bras in the street, but that the ladies, they can do what men can do. And so now if you turn on a news station, now instead of having 3 men and 1 woman, you have 3 women and 1 man. If you go live to the person who's on the scene at the NFL game or in a really bad area, it's a woman now. Because we want to make sure that women are being seen as important. So now we come back into the church, and so I'm just kind of setting this up to get your viewpoint. And we have 2 different camps. We've had churches that doctrinally believe that 1 Timothy chapter 2 and Ephesians and other places of the Scripture, Corinthians 7, that those passages speak specifically that women are to be silent, they're not allowed to teach, they're not allowed to have those kind of roles in a church. And so that side of the camp doctrinally stays with that. And so then it's seen as women have no rights at all. And just recently, within the last couple years, Rick Warren, who is one of the biggest churches in the Southern Baptist Convention, was just removed from the Southern Baptist Convention because he ordained 2 women as pastors in his denomination. And so he took a lot of flack for that and then got removed. And then you have other denominations who take the doctrinal position, like the Church of the Nazarene, who ordain females as pastors, have always seen that as an opportunity, interpret the Scriptures a little differently. But here's my question to you. How do you interpret the Scripture? Because I've studied those Scriptures enough to know that there's enough ambiguity in those Scriptures that I don't think we fully understand the context or even what's going on in those Scriptures. And I think you could almost argue one or the other, and that's part of the problem with those Scriptures. And you might want to go into that a little bit deeper and shed some light on that for us. But the other thing is this: why does the church always tend to follow the world? Because now all of a sudden, like I was in a district meeting, and we had a young lady who decided that some of the changes she wanted to see was more women in our pastor meetings. And I'm like, okay, that's fine if that happens, but this is like the systemic racism thing. Like, we need so many people of color in order for it to be fair. And that's not a good thing or a healthy thing, because if those people of color or the female if they're not adequate or they're not trained or they're not able to do and add to that, then they shouldn't be there just because they're female or just because they're black or whatever that is. So I know that was kind of a big intro to that question, but can you kind of tell us some of your thoughts on that? And maybe even we'll talk about the Scriptures and where that's at.
My. Well, yeah, there's a strong movement going on. You can rest assured of that. I've been interested in the fact that a lot of the programs on TV, like the crime shows, are showing a strong woman with a man backing her up. Mm-hmm. So you've got that whole element, which is obviously promoting something mm-hmm. In our thought process and moving us in a direction. So you're exactly right. We've got a strong movement going on, but the problem, from my view, is that we go from one extreme to another, and of course, I'm not sure the Scriptures is either one. When you come to the Timothy thing, where and Paul is instructing that women should keep still in church. You've got that whole scene where the women were disrupting the service. The sermon was being given. They were stopping the sermon, the teaching, and they were interrupting and asking questions that they were asking because they didn't have enough information. They didn't have education. They didn't have training. And he instructed them, go home and ask your husband. When you get home, ask him and discuss this there. Don't interrupt the service. So women should not speak in church. Well, he wasn't talking about women as women. He was talking about people the women weren't educated in that day, We understand that. And therefore they didn't have knowledge, and they didn't understand, and they needed some basic training that they needed to get before they could ask those kind of questions. So they should be asking at home in private instead of interrupting. So if teenagers were doing that, he would have said that about teenagers. If men were doing that, he would have said that about men. It didn't have anything to do with being a woman or being a man or being a teenager or being a child. It had to do with the ignorant, not knowing, interrupting, disturbing kind of person. In the context of that passage, you can't base a whole good night. We based a whole movement in the context of that shouldn't preach based on that passage. That's ridiculous, brother. Absolutely ridiculous. When you come to the Ephesians thing, Ephesians chapter 6, it's really interesting to me. We men, we love that thing because Paul says that the women should submit to their husband. Okay, they should, because he's the head. Somebody has to make the decision. She needs to submit and come under his decision. Not that she should have input, but it's interesting that Paul only gives 2 verses to that. Just 2 verses.
Right.
And then he branches into husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, which is another way of saying husbands submit to your wife. And he doesn't give 2 verses. He gives more like 8 or 10.
Right.
Because we're so hard-headed, we didn't get it. And he gives illustrations of Jesus, how Jesus loved the church and gave his life for that. And said, husband, this is the way you are to submit to your wife, by giving your very life for her. So you've got 2 dynamics going on there, which if both took place, there wouldn't be any problem in the home.
Right. Right. So if you go back to that Timothy passage, that the other side of the camp that says, no, it is more because Paul specifically says that I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. And then he goes into that whole dialogue about Eve being deceived and tempted and how the woman is more easily deceived. How would you help people walk through that? And one of my things here I just want to throw out is that I was just looking at this the other day, and there's a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are places where Paul specifically says, like in Corinthians, he says, this is me talking, not the Lord, but I'm going to give you what I think here. And then you go into Timothy, and I know he doesn't say this is me, not the Lord, but it is very clear that this seems to be personal for Paul. He says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's a difficult passage. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But if you put that in the context of the entirety of the scriptures, you've got real problems. Because it's interesting, in the book of Judges, you've got these phenomenal women, and if it hadn't been for the women, we'd have been in trouble.
Yeah.
And you and I know that in the church.
Right.
If the women hadn't stepped up, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
So how do you put that in context? Yeah, Eve led us astray, but even in the Adam-Eve thing, it's very plain to me that if you read that carefully, Adam was there all the time.
Yeah.
This isn't Adam's gone, Eve is having a conversation with the devil. No, Adam is there, and he isn't stepping up to his place. See, what would have happened if the boy would have said, hey, wait a minute, and stepped into his place as the head of his house and the spiritual leader of his home and said, we need to have a better discussion about this,
right,
and got involved, but he didn't.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know how to put all that together.
Well, the other thing is too, Pastor Manley, since he was right there because she turned to him, he wasn't deceived. He willingly sinned.
Absolutely. He could not in his head visualize living without her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he gave in instead of trusting and leadership and bringing her into a submission.
Right.
And you know that the wife is never going to submit, and that's the dynamic, I think, of the Ephesians 6. My wife will always submit if I bleed, suffer, and die for her.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a trigger that because she wants security.
Yeah.
She wants somebody she can trust.
Right.
And if she gets that out of me, she'll submit all over the place.
Right.
But
Now,
the reason she doesn't submit is because she can't trust me. So she feels insecure. So
Yeah.
she's got to step up and do what can protect her.
Right. Right. So real quick, you don't have to. I mean, you have kind of shared with us, but there's a part of me that looks at all these texts, and I really struggle because I'm like, to be honest, I want to know what Christ's heart is, but I think there is some leeway back and forth, and I don't think we should be totally dogmatic. But I am struggling with, like you had mentioned, that there is definitely a movement. I am struggling with this because I think Paul made it fairly clear as well that the church there should be an order in the church. And just like in the home where the husband is subservient to Christ and Christ is the head, and then the husband, because Christ is his head, the husband is loving his wife the way he should be, the wife is submitting. It seems like that same model should be that way in the church. And I don't have anything like if we have a female who is not only called by God but trained and is able to preach the word with accuracy, and God has called her to do that, I don't have any problem with that personally. But I do take issue with this idea that the church seems to be going, we just need more women so it looks like we have more women. And I don't think that's going to be healthy for the church at all.
DEI.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. I've been dealing with a guy in Pennsylvania who has done this overwhelming research. I mean, and there was a guy back in the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, who wrote this book, and he's been researching all of this and going through all of this. Anyhow, it doesn't have really anything to do with Christianity, and yet it has everything to do with Christianity. But he has traced, and you can do what you want to with this, but he has traced the rise and fall of civilization based upon marriage. And if you take Christianity, just take Christianity clear out of it, take Jesus clear out of the picture, every society, every civilization has fallen because the marriage and the loyalty to one woman and the production of children went away. And when that goes away, the whole society crumbles.
Mm-hmm.
And he's traced it through, and boy, it's a powerful thought. And when you look at our society, wow, the whole, hey, we don't want to have kids, abort them, we don't. But the society that makes it is a husband, wife oriented society that has lots of kids.
Yeah.
And society has thrived on that. Yeah. And the minute you take that away, now that's a Christian concept.
Right.
Now bring Jesus back into that. That's a Christian concept, which is the heart of society. And are we a million miles from that?
Yeah, definitely.
I guess we are.
Yeah. So what do you say then to the Mormon, the Muslim, who take family really seriously, and it's all about family? Now, I think if you dig a little deeper, depending on where you're at in Mormonism, family also could mean many wives, but that was a long time ago, and that's only in small sects, I guess, today. It's not the overall Mormon belief or doctrine. But even in the Muslim home, Muslims are very much about, getting men and women married and having lots of children, and they believe that that's one of the ways they'll take over the world. Does that? I mean, that's a false doctrine, but does that still help a society hold together?
Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with Christianity in the sense that they had to be Christians. Plus, that it had to do with the fact that a society that was that had a strong husband-wife relationship with lots of kids always survived, and the minute that stopped, they crumbled.
Wow.
Okay. But yeah, of course, being who I am, you can't keep Christianity out of that, because that is a fundamental. That principle came out of the scriptures, that God created family first, not second, first. And everything came out of that. There is a I've been getting into this area, of course, in our group. One of the things that they all live together, guys live. That's one of the big problems you got is the marriage thing. And for a while, we had couples that were living together weren't married. Well, we couldn't put up with that. I mean, come on. If you're going to follow Jesus, you can't do that. So we had put a stop to that. But there is in the Bible approach. And this is still revealing to me. In the biblical approach, when you have gone into a intimate sexual relationship with a woman, you have crossed the line. Now, I could steal from your home. I haven't. That I've done wrong, but I haven't crossed that line. I can kill you, and hey, I've sinned. I get that, but I haven't crossed the line. But when I enter into a sexual relationship with a woman, I have entered into some kind of mystical, spiritual deal that is, I'm calling a line. I don't know where that line is. I don't know what that line is. I know where it is, but I don't know what it is. So there is something that happens in a physical sexual relationship with a woman that puts you into contact. Anybody who knows about spiritual warfare knows that sex is the easiest way to pass a demon to another person.
Wow.
I did not know.
Is that succubus and what are those demons called? The sexual demons. You probably don't know the name.
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I know that you've entered into a relational involvement that's beyond just a physical act. So if you think, and Paul goes to this, he said, when you sleep with a harlot, do you not know you have welded yourself?
Yeah. Does he say, is the phrase there, you become one flesh with her?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. In other words, you've entered into a marriage thing. So there's something going on in the sexual intimacy of a home that is way beyond just a physical act. See, I guess, and I don't know how to distinguish between a physical act of sin, where you, again, I steal your stuff, but this goes beyond that somehow.
So let me Matt's probably wanting to jump in. Let me ask one more question
No,
here.
I mean, I have a thought, but go ahead.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this for a long time, probably last 10 years. That passage you brought up in Corinthians and some other stuff, and looking at the culture. So let me ask the question: the individual who is out there in a relationship with somebody and they're having sex, that sex consummates or makes them one flesh together. There's a mystical, spiritual union there. And so there's this spiritual tie now that brings them together. So when Paul talks about having sex with a harlot, do you not know that it makes you one flesh? And then Jesus talks about the only kind of the only loophole for divorce is infidelity. Is there something that happens? So, like, do we understand that people like, and this is my theory. I haven't nailed this down to say this is it, but if an individual is in a relationship with someone and they're having sex with them, technically they are joined in one flesh. So when they step outside of that relationship and have sex with someone else, is that an act of adultery in the sense that now they are breaking the spiritual union with that person and joining themselves in one flesh with another person? Is that what's going on, or am I missing something there? And are people getting married and divorced all the time out there who are never going to an altar and saying I do, but they're getting married and divorced in this one flesh concept? Can you help me with my theology there?
Oh my. Oh my, Well, yeah, I would go back, and hey, I don't want to step out of line, and I wouldn't correct you in any way, but there are two passages, basically.
Okay.
They are repeated in the Gospels, but there's only two passages where the whole divorce thing is brought up.
Mm-hmm.
One is in the Sermon on the Mount,
Mm-hmm.
which is the chapter 6. No, chapter 5, I'm sorry. Chapter 5, verse, 31. And the other is the Matthew 19, the scene where they're asking the question, trying to trap Jesus.
Yeah.
So those two passages. But, dear brother, neither one of them are teaching on divorce. See,
Right.
we've taken those two passages. It just irritates me to death. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to irritate you. Sorry.
We've taken those two passages and said, oh, here's Jesus teaching on divorce. He's not teaching on divorce at all.
Okay.
He's using those as illustrations of what he's really trying to teach.
Okay.
So we've come to chapter 5, verse 33, and we've looked at that and said, oh, what's the grounds for divorce? Oh, the grounds for divorce is if you commit adultery. Well, that's not what he's saying at all. He says, whoever divorces his wife, let her give her a certificate of divorce. Well, duh. In other words, the passage, the Greek word is really interesting. And this will take too much time, brother. I don't know. I should have gotten into this, but the word divorce. If I say to you, I hear you're dating, and you're still married. Well, yeah, but we're separated. We understand, but you're still married. Absolutely. But we're separated, meaning we don't live together, but legally, theologically, doctrinally, spiritually, we're still married. Well, you have no right to date then, because you're married. If you say to me, well, yeah, I'm dating, but I'm divorced. Oh, so you have nullified the marriage, and legally you are no longer married. Therefore, you have the right to date. We understand the whole idea of separated and divorced. We understand that. Mm-hmm. Well, they did in the scriptures. Now, every time you see the word divorce in the scriptures, where it's just divorce, it's really the word separate. And every time the word divorce is introduced, I mean, really legally divorced, it's certificate of divorce. Every single time, brother. Not once, but every single time.
Okay.
So you can tell in the Greek, for instance, again, verse 31 of Matthew chapter 5. Furthermore, I say to you, whoever divorces, that's separation. The word is separate. Whoever separates from his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. So what were these guys doing? Well, these guys were kicking their wife out. They weren't giving her a divorce. They were just getting rid of her and doing what they wanted to do. They were separating without. Well, she's in a bind. What on earth is she going to do? She can't get a job because the women didn't work. The only thing she can do is be a prostitute or go back to her father. And if her father won't have him, she's thrown into living with anybody she can for life. So the distinction between those two words in the scriptures is very, very important. So then he goes on and says, you guys are separating from your wife without giving her a divorce certificate. He said, don't do that. I say to you, whoever divorces, separates, is the word, from his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery. Well, duh. If I separate from my wife, kick her out, and she goes and lives with another guy, what have I caused her to do?
Yeah.
See, I've caused her to commit adultery.
Right.
I've caused that by what I've done. I've caused her to commit adultery. And whoever marries that woman who is divorced, who's separated, that's the word separate again, because it's not certificate of divorce. Whoever is separated from whoever marries a woman who is separated commits adultery. So I've not only caused her to commit adultery, I've caused the guy who marries her to commit adultery. Why? Because I didn't legally do what I'm supposed to do. So what is he saying? He's saying, what are you causing in your wife? Man, that thing tore me up, brother. What am I causing in my wife? Wow. Because that's my responsibility as a husband, as a leadership, spiritual leader in my home. What am I causing my wife? Am I causing, for instance, I come home from my job, which is a joke because I never worked in my life. But anyhow, I come home from my job and I'm, yeah. What have I just caused in my wife? Well, I've just caused her to go, yeah. She can't trust me. Where you been? I'm gone for the whole weekend. Where you been? Well, none of your business. What have I caused in my wife? Distrust? Insecurity? See, I've just caused that in her. So am I reaching out, grabbing a hold of my wife, pulling her into security, pulling her into trust, pulling her into godliness, pulling her into prayer, pulling her into faith? Am I wrapping my arm around her saying, we'll make this because Jesus is adequate? Or what am I doing in my wife? That's the whole issue of the passage. Has nothing to do with divorce. It has to do with what are you causing in your wife? So now, he does the same thing in Matthew chapter 19.
Okay. And this is where the Sadducees question, they make up the story about a woman who's married 7 different times to all the brothers, right?
No, that's another passage, but that's not on divorce.
No, that's on resurrection.
That's on the resurrection. Yeah. It's the Matthew 19 is where he's in the Herod Antipas's territory, and can a guy divorce his wife for just any reason?
Okay. And
Jesus says, "Whoa, haven't you read the Bible?" Well, they had memorized the first 5 chapters, man. Mm-hmm. And he quotes Genesis. God said, "Well, then you're going against Moses, because Moses said we could divorce our wives." Yeah, and why did he say that? Because God gave a way out for ungodly men who were hurting their women, and he gave the woman a safety valve, a way out. And it wasn't intended to be that way because of the hardness of your heart, for your stinking selfishness, for your carnal mind. He gave the safety for a woman and a way out for her. In fact, it's really interesting when you say, well, God is against divorce. It's really interesting that, what is that passage? It's really interesting that says God divorced Israel.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the 10 tribes, brother. Mm-hmm. And they disappeared.
Yeah.
They literally disappeared.
Yeah.
Because God divorced them, wiped his hands of them and divorced them. What are you going to do with that passage? So God got a divorce.
And then is it Malachi or Micah where it says God hates divorce?
Yeah, he does. There isn't any question, because it's not right. It shouldn't be.
But he also hates and doesn't want the wicked to perish, but for them to come to salvation.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely. So you've got this dynamic going on. Back in the day, before I became Nazarene, I was a part of a church that if you were divorced, that was the unpardonable sin, brother. You couldn't be a member of the church. You could come and give your money, but you couldn't be a member of the church because you couldn't be on the board or anything, because it was the unpardonable sin. You had a black mark on your name forever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that isn't biblical.
Pastor Manley, you might be helping people get a better motivation to divorce right now.
Sounds like like it's just a piece of paper.
Do you think that this teaching was held back, or that people didn't want to enter into this teaching? Because again, Jesus never speaks anything in a vacuum, and just because he speaks a truth doesn't mean, okay, it gives me permission to go do this. But do you think that the church didn't want to wrestle with these passages because it was easier to just say, hey, don't get a divorce? Because I know a lot of older people that I think stayed together for life that hated each other's guts, but they did it because they figured if they got divorced, they're going to go to hell.
Yeah, I'm sure that is the case. But the impact of the scriptures and the spiritual desire of everything we've talked about is that God wants you to deal with the hate in your life.
Yeah.
Could that couple deal with the hate that they have with each other?
Right.
And could their lives change? And could they have the heart of Christ? Because obviously they had some kind of attraction towards each other, and some kind of love was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So they come back to that, repent, change, or are they going to hang on to their hate and their stubbornness and that's the Matthew 19 thing, because he says, because of the hardness of your heart, God gave a way out for the woman who was being mistreated.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and you can see that, man. Are you going to tell me that a husband who's beating his wife and treating her unfairly, or who has become a homosexual or whatever and is having multiple affairs, that she has to put up with that?
right.
Well, no, she doesn't.
Right.
God gave her a way out.
So question, back to that passage in Matthew chapter 5, does the separation, if the woman separates, or if for infidelity, so if the woman separates herself, doesn't get a certificate, but separates herself and goes and has sexual relations with another man, is that where the legal okayness is for the husband to go? Because I don't think that's grounds to say, okay, if your wife cheats on you, you automatically kick her to the curb and get her out of there, because you shouldn't learn to love her in the midst of her sin if she's willing to work that out with you. But what is that clause there then, Reverend Manley, as you've studied that? What's that clause mean if she separates or if she commits infidelity? What is that? Because that's something, obviously, yes, maybe the husband has driven her to that, but obviously she's sinned, right? Correct?
Well, you got to put this in the context of the day.
Okay.
The woman could not get a divorce. She did not have the right. The ability to step out and divorce her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So no woman divorced her husband. It was the man who was in charge. He could get a divorce, but she could not.
Okay.
So she couldn't leave.
Mm-hmm.
He could, but she couldn't. So put that in that context. So he says, but I say to you, whoever divorces his wife separates from his wife. It's not separate from his husband. It's separate from his wife. Why would he say that? Because that's the context of the day.
But why does he say except for infidelity? So that then is the kind of the clause that says that as a husband, if you're treating her right, you're treating her the way she needs to be treated, and she steps out, then you have the right then to give her a certificate of divorce?
Absolutely. And should. But again, put this back in the context of the verse. I say to you, whoever separates from his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her. You're causing something in her. You're causing her to commit adultery because you're not giving her a certificate of divorce. You're separating from her, but you're not giving her. See, that's the whole thrust of the passage.
Okay.
So the whole issue, as you expand that in other applications, is what are you causing in your wife?
Okay, so this, I'm probably going to open up a can of worms. Maybe Matt would want to speak to this too, but Reverend Manley, I want to throw this out to you too. How has our culture then impacted how we treat our wives or our husbands? Because if we go back to like what I was talking about earlier, now all of a sudden women want to be empowered, but yet at the same time, for years, the man was like, there's this view that the man goes to work, he makes, the living, he comes home, she's supposed to be barefoot, pregnant. Are all these worldly scenarios or worldly views of how marriage is supposed to be, is that why we've gotten ourselves into trouble with marriage? Because we're not looking at the biblical concept? Because a lot of men are like, well, listen, I'm not going to be lovey-dovey with my wife. I don't care about her feelings. I'm a man. I shouldn't have to care about her feelings because I'm a man. Are we missing the biblical view, and we've bought too much into the worldly view, whether it's all the way back in first century Rome with the Pharisees and the whole culture of divorce there, or we come into the 21st century here in America where now we're struggling with the roles of men and women and all that stuff. Thoughts on that, you or Matt?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, there isn't any question about that. It's interesting, all of these years of ministry, and you've had enough years of ministry to know this. There is a danger. A woman, and this is not to downplay, I'm not degrading, I'm not belittling, but I've just observed. For instance, an example would be intercessors. And this, in terms of, let's talk about spiritual leadership. I've watched it again and again and again. A woman in spiritual intercessory leadership. In other words, I'm an intercessor, or I've got spiritual gifts, which is back to the pastoral thing. There is a danger in her, stronger. It's also in men, but it's stronger in her than it is in the man. She begins to be empowered, and I've seen that again and again and again, where it took over in her life and brought about a spiritual superiority that ruined her. It ruined her ministry. It ruined her intercessory. It ruined because she couldn't come into. I've got a woman who was an intercessor for us, and I've watched her. But what saved her was she came under the control of her pastor. She bent under the control and authority of her pastor. And that saved her. And she never developed a spiritual superiority in all of her intercessory. And she's a powerful woman. But it saved her to come under the authority of a spiritual pastor. And there is this tendency for a woman, I watched it in the home, people who weren't pastors. When the woman is the leader and she's the powerhouse, and she is the boss, and the husband is playing the role of the feminine. There's something, it ruins the whole dynamic because she's out of place somehow.
Right.
And there is a trap in that. And it isn't that she shouldn't have a say. It isn't that she shouldn't be powerful, have a ministry. See, it's not about that. It's a spiritual role. See, I don't know how to describe it, but I've watched that time and time and time again, where the woman then begins to play the role of the man, and it gets out of control. And it ruins the whole home and influences the kids and destroys the marriage. I've just watched it again and again and again.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why Paul makes that connection between the home and the church. And so I think it's just healthier if the man, the pastor, is male. And again, I'm not saying that a denomination or a church is going to hell because they necessarily have a female pastor, if that's what God has called them to. But I think the role or the design that God had was that if the male submits himself to Christ, that is the best model, that the women then would be under that authority. At least as I look at it, because Paul talks about the family role of the husband being, under Christ. Christ is the head, and then the husband, and then the wife. And when you look at the church, then he talks about that in that context. He talks about the church, and that kind of role seems to be the best model. Doesn't mean it's the only model, but it seems to be the best model. Matt, you got anything to say? You're sitting over there. You're quiet today.
Yeah, I'm quiet today.
All right. You want to jump in at all?
Well, no, I'm good.
Pastor Manley, you have shut Matt up. That is a difficult thing to do.
Well, I didn't mean to, but what I'm trying to say is that the women pastors, fine, women leaders, fine. We got that all through the scriptures, fine. We got it in Paul's ministry.
Yep.
Where the planted the church. That's all fine. Nobody's against that.
Right.
But there is a danger in that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a danger that dynamic produces that's not produced otherwise.
Right.
Well, all right. So if we tie all these thoughts together, the fact that there is a woman pastor, would that mean that there is a man? Would that mean that there's men failing to step up, and so the woman needs to kind of fill that role? Because it seems like it's becoming more prevalent, and because the United States has given women, we've acknowledged that human beings are human beings and we're all equal as human beings. Mm-hmm. If there is a danger, like go back to the garden, and this could be archaic, barbaric, and I'm trying to string this all together with all my new knowledge I've learned today. The woman throughout the Bible seems to play the danger role. Does that make sense? Like, I don't even know how do you even say that? Because if I take what Manley's saying today, no matter what happens, the man failed. Okay?
He's responsible.
He's responsible. So no matter what the excuse is, the man was a failure. And so the man has that steep of a Pastor Manley, am I understanding that correctly? Is that a thing? Does that make sense what I just said? Like the buck stops at the man in a marriage, right?
I think we lost his volume. That's what happens when you start talking.
Yeah,
man.
no, this is again. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I don't know. I hit a button. Maybe I didn't mean to.
Oh goodness.
Pastor
Are we
Manley,
back on?
stop touching things.
Yeah, no, you're back on. So I asked the question.
Yeah. So, yeah, the man failed, which caused the woman to fail, which is the passage in Matthew.
So is
Because
there
the
no
man
is there no place where the woman can fail?
Oh, yeah, she has failed. The man failed, which caused the woman to fail, which caused the kids to fail.
Now that's a New Testament, but if you go to the Old Testament, the woman was, because Paul brings that out, right? The woman was first. She was deceived, and then the man went.
Yeah, but understand in the dynamic of the context, she failed because he didn't step up.
Because he was there.
He was there.
And he was told that they weren't supposed to eat anything, any other tree
Yeah.
except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And he got the message first. How did she know that they weren't supposed to eat of the fruit? How did she know that God said we should not? Because
know.
the man told her.
Yeah, I know. I've played that over and over in my head. Why does it say that he was told? It doesn't say anything about her being told. So that means he had to he had to have the responsibility to convey that information to her, right?
Exactly.
I know. I've played that in my head over and over.
So are we saying that he didn't?
That he didn't what?
No, she knew, right? Because she explained to the serpent that they.
Oh, absolutely.
So she knew. He told her.
Yeah, he taught her that.
She just didn't listen to Papa.
My brain is tapioca. Forget about it. Let's just forget about it.
In fact, God told Adam that before he created the woman. That was the fundamental before the creation of the woman out of the rib. And he taught her that and said, here's the way we're going to operate. And here she is now talking to the devil. He's there and he doesn't step in.
Okay, this might take us into the weeds even deeper, but so when Paul is talking about that in Ephesians about marriage, and then he says, but I'm talking about, the relationship between Christ and the church. Does that mean that this whole role of husband or of the male itself is trying to get us to an understanding that ultimately we've been invested with a responsibility as men to be and I don't take this wrong because I know we're not. I know Jesus is the only Savior, but we're to be the saviors and the sanctifiers of our wives and our children and our homes?
Absolutely, brother. And again, that's not only there in Ephesians, but that's the Matthew 6. What are you causing in your wife? Well, she goes out and sleeps with another man. Who caused that?
Man, is it always our fault?
That's what I'm asking. I mean, well,
you know the answer to that. No, it's not always our fault. And that's why that's why there's this protection, and maybe that isn't a good word. There's this provision that God made because it's not going to be a fair world. So he set up the divorce thing. The divorce idea was a plan of God for the protection for what was unfair in an ungodly situation.
Okay, what time is it? It's almost 11.
it's 11 o'clock.
Okay, so here's the thing, Reverend Man. Let's go into one more thing then, okay? Because now I get, okay, and the reason I want to bring this up is because this has been one of the first times I started to think through this was when I had a discussion with you. And I've been thinking through it more. And then it came up in a class that I was teaching. And so I started talking about it. And there was some controversy about the whole thing. But it's the passage that I mentioned earlier when the Sadducees come to Jesus and they make up the story about the woman who gets married and her husband dies. And then she marries the brother. And it happens 7 times. And when she gets into the kingdom, whose wife is she going to be? And of course, we know that the context is resurrection. They're asking a question about resurrection, not about marriage in heaven. But because of what Jesus says about the fact that they don't know the scriptures or the power of God, and that when you get to heaven, you'll be like the angels, neither given in marriage nor taken in marriage. And so because of that one passage now, you've got all this stuff going on here on earth where people are getting divorced, they're getting, and God has made this provision for people to do that. But when we get to heaven, like the more and more I look at heaven and I look at Eden, the way God intended it to be, for us to be fruitful and multiply, if we're going back, or we're going forward, but to a greater place, it's hard for me to think that we're not going to have intimate relationships with our wives. But if that's the case, then who gets to decide, how that whole thing looks? Because if you've lived 50 some years with your wife and you get to heaven and you're married to her and God says, hey, I'm going to let you live an intimate relationship with her in the new kingdom for all of eternity. Well, then how do we help people, work through the new kingdom and what that would look like in the new kingdom if they've been divorced? And I know that's really high grass, and I know that's a can of worms, but if we're going to look at the new kingdom and see it as a place where God hasn't necessarily put a halt on us being male and female and being in relationship with one another, can you help us maybe kind of walk through that a little bit?
Well, probably not. But there's a few things we do know. There's a lot we don't know.
Okay.
But there's a few things we do know. Number one, you're not going to tell me that there's going to be no femininity and masculinity, that female and male are going to disappear.
Right.
Good night. Do you, and you understand this?
Yep.
The femininity, when my wife is feminine, she walks feminine, she talks feminine, she thinks, and she's everything about her is feminine.
Mm-hmm.
You mean she's going to die and that's going to go away? Who would she be?
Right.
See, that's not a sideline in her life, like an ingrown toenail. That's the DNA of her system.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with me. I think masculine. I'm concrete in my approach. Get a hammer and hit it, man. Don't sit over there and bawl. Get a hammer and hit the thing. That's a part of my DNA, how I operate. That's going to go away? No, it's not.
Right.
So that's going to be an eternal thing. So take that into the eternities. Now, and it's really important to me that in that passage, Jesus answered and said, you are mistaken. Now, of course, he's talking to guys who don't even believe in the resurrection. You realize that.
Yeah.
You are mistaken. Well, how are you mistaken? Two things. You don't know the scriptures, and you don't know the power of God. Those are the two things you're mistaken on.
Mm-hmm.
And, he does give this thing, you're going to be like the angels in heaven. But we've based a whole doctrine on that.
Right.
That little statement one time. Come on, you can't do that.
Right.
You're mistaken. Why? Because you don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God. Mm-hmm. So I believe that what he's saying in the passage is that God is going to take this whole feminine masculinity that you want to argue about, and he's going to take it into a whole new dimension. And that sex is going to be something like you don't have any idea what this thing is all about. That sexual relationship that you think is so great down here, wow. You have no idea where this thing is going in relationship.
Okay.
Now, I don't know how you're going to put people who've had multiple wives. I don't know how you're going to put that together. I have no idea on that. I don't know how all of that comes together in heaven. I don't know how the relational kind of thing is structured and how that dynamic is going to take place. But that there's lots of things I don't know about heaven.
Hey, let's throw out weird. Noah, his family repopulated the earth. Only one way to do that.
Absolutely.
What's going to happen with those people?
Oh yeah,
Is your wife your sister?
that's right. I didn't think about that.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
I tell you what, I will not be married to my sister in heaven, Mr. Manley. I don't care. I mean, I love Jesus with all my heart. That is not happening for me.
Well, I don't think you need to worry about that. But hey, I think that Adam and Eve's kids had to. I mean, you don't have any choice on that.
Yeah.
There weren't any women for Cain and Abel to marry, except their sisters.
Oh yeah. Okay. First, I was going to thank Mom, but so Reverend Manley, when I was thinking through this, of course, I start to read other stuff and see what other people might think after I think through the passage myself and all that. And there is this view that the concept of taken and given in marriage, there is this thought that some people have said that what Jesus was trying to say is that when you're here on earth, you're taken and given in marriage in the marred nature of the sin nature. So what you do is dad arranges a marriage for you, and that's how you're married. Or you walk by the local Walmart and you see this beautiful woman and you decide, oh, I got to have her, and that's how you get married. And
Walmart?
But yeah, whatever. But when you get to heaven, that the given and taken in marriage, God will decide who you spend eternity with, because he then will make that up. And it may be the person that you chose on earth, because obviously if God has ordained that, then he will allow that. But if you get to heaven and you've been divorced or whatever, you can be assured that God in his goodness will give or allow you to be taken in eternity in the way. And that was their way of kind of solving that issue there. And I don't know whether that's even plausible or not, but it sounded at least like a decent term, because ultimately God's will is what we long for ultimately anyway. But I don't know. That's just a thought.
Yeah, I'd have to think that through, because number one, how am I going to? I get to heaven and you married the wrong gal, buddy, and so I'm off with some other woman. How am I going to forget 63 years of memory?
Right. Well, I guess that's why this individual, and I don't remember where I read this at, but their thought was that if you've done it well here on earth and you've learned to love that person, then God's will was that, and that'll be God's will for eternity.
Yeah.
So you'll be safe forever, Manley.
Oh, good.
It's just the rest of us. It's the rest of us yay-hoots that'll be working on figuring this out.
Oh my. It's a mystery. Isn't this fun?
Yeah.
My, what an adventure we're on, brother.
It is.
It's not fun.
Let me ask you a question, Reverend Manley. This isn't because you're an older gentleman, because any of us could, are you excited to walk into the next realm?
Oh, dear brother. Well, obviously you don't know, but April the 1st, I was diagnosed with brain cancer.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, worst kind, very aggressive. I got a year, 6 months to a year. The minute I heard it, my heart leaped for overwhelming joy, because I had been praying for a new intimacy with Jesus. Can you imagine walking into a whole new adventure of his presence and purpose and ministry, and the new dimension that we've dreamed of all these days, and what we've got in our fingertips here? So I guess that's the answer to your question. That was my first, and you don't know how you're going to react to that kind of thing, but that was my first reaction. Wow. Praise the Lord. Man, the problem with dying is getting there. I don't have any problem with dying. It's, again, getting there that's the issue. So I'm facing this. But, man, I'm just, I'm tickled pink. I'm telling you. I've never had a sick day in my life until now. When I was 40, I was, I determined I wanted to be preaching strong when I was 80. And when I was 80, I was doing what I was doing when I was 50. So I'm right at the brink of that. So your question is valid and alive in my life,
Wow.
because we're right at the brink of all that this is going to mean.
Wow. Is obviously is there anything specific ways that we can be praying then specifically for you?
Well, yeah, I don't know. The whole prayer thing and the whole healing thing. Hey, I believe in miracles, brother. I do. But I've been anointed by more people and prayed before. And you think about it. Hey, okay, let's get a petition. Bless God. I'll send it out all over the Church of the Nazarene. I'll get 500,000 people to sign this petition. Heal Manley, and I'll give it to God. And God says, well, it should have been 500,025.
Yeah, right.
Whoa. How
Right.
many times do you have to pray? How much? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is what he has, a divine plan. I'm happy. Come on. I don't know. I don't know how to handle all that.
Yeah.
But I got more people praying and believing. And so, hey, I've had the radiation. I finished that last week 15 times. And I'm on chemo pills. And I've been so blessed. I'm coming into this healthy. I haven't had any side effects except fatigue. I haven't had nausea, headaches. I think the reason I haven't had any headaches is because my brain is so small. There's lots of room up there.
That's good. That's good.
But anyhow, the fatigue has been awful.
Wow.
Just every movement is an effort. It's just been interesting.
Wow.
But hey, yeah, I appreciate your just keep remembering, and
Okay.
the Lord is supporting. And of course, it's a whole new deal. I hate it for my wife because I hate to put her through all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, not to catch you in a hard space or even to ask you a tough question, but I always try to make decisions based on the fact that if I wasn't here, what would be easiest for April and the boys, but eventually, the boys won't be at home, but what would be easiest for April?
yeah.
And I think that way. That's got to be stuff that's going through your head then, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and the whole financial thing, and of course I had to cancel all my meetings, and that was the lifeline. That was the support. Except I had the big retirement from the Nazarenes.
Yeah, that's got to be quite large. Does she have enough to
$300 of it.
does she have enough to buy McDonald's once a week?
I don't know. McDonald's has gotten pretty high.
Yeah.
Oh, sir. Well, then obviously there's enough people around you that love you and your wife that she will be well taken care of by the Lord, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, we're counting on that. One thing that I might, and I don't want to do a commercial kind of thing, but one thing we're doing, all the buildings that our guys are living in for our program and the ministry here are pretty well covered. We got about 13 properties, houses and properties, and they're all paid for pretty well, except for two, and those are all on interest free, so you can't afford to touch them.
Mm-hmm.
But we got into this farm before I found out about all this. And the interesting thing about the farm deal was it's 23 acres, but the farm deal is that the old man who owns it is in assisted living. So we're paying his assisted living, and we're doing it on a lease to own basis. So the entire payment is going directly on the principal, which means there's no interest. The beauty of that is overwhelming. So we didn't have to go out and borrow. We're just making his payment on the assisted living. Now, of course, when he dies, the kids are going to want the money. So we're trying through the 10% giving, we're trying to raise $500,000 that we can put in the bank, gather interest so that when he dies, that'll be covered and the ministry will basically be debt free. So I've been soliciting, writing letters and doing whatever I can to contact churches, asking if we could be a part of their mission program, their mission budget for their year. If I could get 500 churches to give $1,000, that would pretty well cover that.
Yeah.
And we could put that money in the bank and draw interest until he dies.
Okay.
Should pretty well cover everything.
All right.
So that's an idea. It's a plan.
Okay. Or you'd only need 250 churches if they each gave 2,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll just keep
That
doing
sounds
it.
easy.
We'll keep
but,
doing
you
it.
know,
Yeah.
It's hard. I
Right.
know, and everybody's wanting money, and I get all that. So
Yeah.
there's no pressure.
Yeah. But one thing I've always appreciated, Reverend Manley, with you is that I've never seen even a wink of you longing to take money other than for the purpose of advancing the gospel or the ministry. Now, obviously, you and your wife have to live, and you've probably gone out to dinner and stuff. You've probably, you've not lived, a hermit's life or anything. However, in a world that we live in where that is all abused, I've always been so grateful that even when you've come here to speak, you've never, said, hey, I need this much or whatever, and we've always given the offering, and you probably drove away and said, man, I don't know if I should go back there. That was not a very good gig. Yeah, God's always
You guys
provided.
have treated us, you've been a friend, and you've supported and given us opportunity, and you've pushed me towards Jesus, and I'm grateful for that, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you've been always an inspiration in our life. So, as long as you are up to it, you're okay if I send you a text and we come on and do some shows and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
As long as you're feeling
Sure.
all right.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Appreciate the privilege.
Okay. All right. Well, it is 20 after 11, so we need to let you go, and we appreciate you, Reverend Manley, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for enlightening us.
Blessings. I don't know that we solved anything, but we had a good time.
Yeah, we did. Well, we got all of eternity to solve some of this stuff. So.
Yeah, we'll get this figured out.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, blessings on you.
All right.
Thank you.
Go ahead. You finish out your thought.
Well, we got an error report.